General Hospital will reveal. In recent days, the dramatic story in Port Charles has taken unexpected turns as Ava discovered the truth behind Rick's accident. After Rick woke up and revealed that his brakes had failed, Ava decided to investigate at the auto repair shop herself. There, she confirmed that the brakes had been deliberately cut, and when combined with the information Rick provided about Christina being present at the accident scene, everything began to make sense. Christina's story about being in the warehouse all night was exposed as a blatant lie. Ava and Rick met secretly to exchange information. They quickly realized that Christina had deliberately sabotaged the car thinking it was Ava's, not knowing Rick would be the one driving it. Although the accident didn't take Rick's life, it left him with irreparable damage. However, instead of making the truth public, Ava and Rick secretly devised a plan. They decided to pretend that Rick's injuries were more severe than they actually were to take advantage of the situation. With evidence in hand, Ava approached Sonny not to demand $2 million as before, but a shocking figure, $100 million. She also demanded full custody of Avery, with no interference from Sonny. Faced with the prospect of his daughter going to prison for attempted murder, Sonny found himself in an impossible situation. He wanted to protect Christina at all costs, but the amount Ava demanded far exceeded his current financial capabilities, even as a crime boss. Meanwhile, unaware of the blackmail plot unfolding, Christina was becoming increasingly obsessed with her desire for revenge. She didn't realize that her impulsive action had put her in a dangerous position. Her newly repaired relationship with Molly was also under serious threat if the truth were to be revealed. Ava, with this terrible secret in her possession, was enjoying the feeling of power returning. She had grown tired of poverty and the endless custody battles with Sonny. Now, she held the opportunity to reclaim everything she had lost and more. Rick also saw this as the perfect opportunity to get revenge on Christina without hurting Molly any further. As time passed, the pressure mounted on Sonny. He had to find a way to secure the enormous sum while keeping his daughter's actions secret. Christina, unaware she was standing on the edge of collapse, would soon face the consequences of her actions and might have to beg her father to accept Ava's conditions to avoid prison and salvage her relationship with Molly. Meanwhile, completely oblivious to the blackmail scheme unfolding behind the scenes, Christina was spiraling deeper into her obsession with revenge. Each passing day saw her growing more unstable, her thoughts increasingly consumed by elaborate fantasies of making Ava suffer. Late at night, she would sit alone in her apartment, scrolling through old news articles about Ava's past crimes, convincing herself that her actions were justified. She had begun keeping a journal detailing all the perceived slights and injuries Ava had inflicted upon her family over the years, a document that would be damning evidence if ever discovered. The rage that had initially driven her to sabotage Ava's car had not diminished but rather intensified after the accident. When she learned that Rick had been the victim instead, a momentary flash of guilt was quickly rationalized away. In her distorted thinking, she convinced herself that Rick's injuries were simply collateral damage in her righteous crusade against Ava. She had started making new plans, more dangerous than before, completely blind to how her first attempt had already placed her in grave legal jeopardy. Christina failed to recognize how her impulsive action had created a precarious house of cards that could collapse at any moment. She continued to maintain her false alibi about being in the warehouse all night, repeating the lie so often that she almost believed it herself. She had no idea that both Ava and Rick already knew the truth, or that they were strategically plotting to use her crime against her father. Her freedom hung by the thinnest of threads, yet she continued to behave recklessly, making cryptic comments about justice that raised eyebrows among her friends and family. The newly repaired relationship with her sister Molly was particularly vulnerable. After years of tension and distance, they had finally begun to rebuild their bond following the surrogacy tragedy. They had established a weekly lunch tradition at Kelly's Diner, where they would share stories and slowly reclaim their sisterhood. Molly had even confided in Christina about her plans to adopt a child with TJ, asking her sister to be the child's godmother. This fragile reconciliation would shatter instantly if Molly discovered that Christina had deliberately endangered Rick, Molly's father. The betrayal would be unforgivable, likely creating a permanent rift between the sisters. Alexis, Christina's mother, was also suffering tremendously because of her daughter's actions, though she remained unaware of the full extent of Christina's involvement. As a former attorney, Alexis had sensed something was amiss with the accident investigation and had been asking uncomfortable questions around town. Her intuition told her that Christina was somehow connected, though she couldn't bring herself to confront her daughter directly. The stress had driven Alexis back to attending daily AA meetings, as the temptation to drink again grew stronger with each passing day. Her hands would tremble as she poured her morning coffee, fighting the urge to add a splash of vodka from the bottle she kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies, a secret relapse she had managed to conceal from everyone. The ripple effects of Christina's vendetta extended beyond her immediate family. Her best friend Sam was caught in an impossible position, suspecting something was wrong but loyal to a fault. Christina's colleagues at Charlie's pub had noticed her erratic behavior, with her boss considering termination after she'd snapped at several customers. Even young Avery, innocent in all this, sensed the tension during visitations, becoming withdrawn and anxious when around her half-sister. Everyone in Christina's orbit was being pulled into her destructive vortex, their lives disrupted by her single-minded pursuit of vengeance. As Port Charles continued its daily rhythms, no one except Ava and Rick understood that Christina was standing at the precipice of disaster. Her freedom, her relationships, her very future, all were balanced on a knife's edge, ready to collapse when the truth inevitably came to light. And still, blinded by hatred, she plotted her next move against Ava, unaware that she had already lost the game before it had truly begun. Ava, with the terrible secret firmly in her grasp, was experiencing a resurgence of power that she hadn't felt in years. As she sat in her sparsely furnished apartment, a far cry from the luxurious penthouse she once owned, she allowed herself a rare moment of unbridled satisfaction. The crystal tumbler of bourbon in her hand caught the afternoon light, casting amber reflections across her face as she contemplated how dramatically her fortunes were about to change. For too long, she had been forced to count pennies, to accept humiliating handouts, to watch her art gallery, once the crown jewel of her identity, crumble into financial ruin. The bankruptcy had been the final indignity, forcing her to auction off her beloved paintings and sculptures for a fraction of their worth. But now, as she reviewed the evidence she had meticulously gathered, the mechanic's report confirming the brake lines had been deliberately cut, the security footage showing Christina's car at the garage on the night in question, Rick's sworn statement about seeing Christina at the accident scene, Ava felt the intoxicating rush of leverage. This wasn't just about money, though the $100 million she demanded from Sonny would certainly restore her to her former glory and then some. This was about reclaiming her dignity, her autonomy, and most importantly, her daughter. The custody battles with Sonny had been relentless and soul-crushing. Every time she thought she had secured a stable arrangement for Avery, Sonny would find some legal loophole or exploit some minor parenting mistake to drag her back to court. His resources seemed limitless. The best lawyers, private investigators documenting her every move, character witnesses ready to testify about her checkered past. The playing field had never been level, and Ava had grown weary of fighting a war she couldn't win. She recalled the last custody hearing 6 months ago, when Judge Carson had reduced her visitation rights after Sonny's legal team presented evidence that she had allowed Avery to spend time with her brother Julian, who had a criminal record. The fact that Julian had been fully rehabilitated and was now running a legitimate business meant nothing to the court. Sonny's influence ran too deep in Port Charles. That day, as she watched Avery being led away by Sonny's nanny, the little girl looking back with confused, tearful eyes, something had broken inside Ava. She had vowed then that she would find a way to turn the tables. And now, Providence had delivered that opportunity directly into her hands. Christina's reckless attempt at revenge had backfired spectacularly, and Ava intended to exploit it to the fullest. She had already drafted new custody papers with her attorney, demanding full legal and physical custody of Avery with Sonny reduced to supervised visitation twice monthly. The document sat in her safe, ready to be presented alongside the blackmail demand. Ava had spent hours rehearsing exactly how she would present her terms to Sonny. She would be calm, businesslike, showing him the evidence piece by piece. She would remind him of the mandatory minimum sentence for attempted murder in New York State, 15 years. She would describe in vivid detail how Christina would fare in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, surrounded by hardened criminals. And then, when she saw the desperation in his eyes, she would name her price, $100 million in Avery, in exchange for her silence. The sum wasn't arbitrary. Ava had calculated it precisely to cause maximum pain without being completely impossible. She knew from her sources that Sonny's legitimate businesses had taken significant hits during the recent economic downturn. His coffee importing company was barely breaking even, and his restaurant had closed 3 locations in the past year. While his less legitimate enterprises were surely still profitable, liquidating $100 million in assets would require selling properties, calling in debts, and possibly even borrowing from his more dangerous associates. It would weaken his empire considerably, another delicious benefit to her plan. As for Rick, he had become an unexpected but valuable ally in this scheme. During their clandestine meeting at the abandoned warehouse on Pier 54, Ava had been surprised by his eagerness to participate. She had expected some resistance, some moral qualms about targeting his niece, but Rick's eyes had gleamed with a vindictiveness that matched her own. "Christina has been a thorn in my side for years," he had confided, leaning heavily on his cane, a prop he had adopted to exaggerate his injuries. "Always judging me, always poisoning Molly against me. Do you know she convinced Molly to exclude me from her wedding? My own daughter." The pain in his voice had been genuine, and Ava recognized in him a kindred spirit, another parent who had been denied their rightful place in their child's life. Their partnership was pragmatic. Rick would continue to play the role of the seriously injured victim, attending physical therapy sessions he didn't need, wearing neck braces and back supports in public, documenting every fictitious setback for maximum sympathy. He had already given a statement to the police suggesting that the brake failure seemed suspicious but stopping short of accusing anyone directly. Meanwhile, Ava would handle the confrontation with Sonny, the financial negotiations, and the custody arrangements. They had agreed on a 70-30 split of the money, Ava taking the lion's share since she was taking the greater risk. Rick didn't care about the money as much as he cared about seeing Christina face consequences while simultaneously rebuilding his relationship with Molly, who had been doting on him since the accident. It was the perfect arrangement. Ava would regain her wealth and her daughter, Rick would regain his daughter's affection, and both would have the satisfaction of watching their enemies suffer. As the sun began to set over Port Charles, casting long shadows across her apartment, Ava finished her bourbon and stood to gaze out the window. In the distance, she could see the lights of Sonny's restaurant on the waterfront, a symbol of his enduring power in this town. But not for much longer, she thought with a smile. Soon, she would reclaim her rightful place in this city's hierarchy. She would rebuild her gallery, perhaps expand into Manhattan. Avery would have the finest education, the finest clothes, the finest of everything. And Christina? Well, whether she ended up in prison or merely disgraced and disowned would depend entirely on how cooperative Sonny proved to be. Either way, Ava would savor the girl's downfall as the sweetest part of her revenge, a dish she had waited far too long to serve. With renewed purpose, Ava picked up her phone and dialed Rick's number. It was time to set the final phase of their plan in motion. Tomorrow, she would pay Sonny a visit that would change all their lives forever. As the phone rang, Ava's lips curved into a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. The game was already won, Sonny just didn't know it yet. As time passed, the pressure increasingly weighed on Sonny. He had to find a way to secure the enormous sum while still keeping his daughter's actions secret. Christina, unaware that she was standing on the brink of collapse, would soon have to face the consequences of her actions and might need to beg her father to accept Ava's conditions to avoid prison and salvage her relationship with Molly.